All right, everybody. Hello and good morning. My name is Nathan Eason. I work with the University of Georgia Extension. I'm found in the northeast part of the state in a county, and I'm involved and serve on the board with American Society of Enology and Viticulture Eastern Section. If this is your first time to our Hangtime session, Grapevines to Wines discussion, we welcome you. This is our second year. We are just excited to be back doing this. We had a lot of great success with it last year, and we hope that you, if you are returning to us, that you likewise felt it was worthwhile. Want to just say that thank you for registering. Hopefully on the registration link, you've signed up for all of the rest of the programs. That's new to us this year, that format, being able to go ahead and get signed up and put on your calendar off that registration link. And we were able to capture where you're from. And today we have people from across the entire country, from Colorado to Georgia to Virginia to Sweden to Greece. So we have lots of participation. So it's super fantastic and excited everybody could be here. Going to go over a few Zoom rules. The way we have this format set up is you are muted and have no video. However, we want this to be engaging, and we want you to ask questions and question our panelists today. So to do that, you have a little icon at the bottom of your screen that is a raised hand. So what you will do is you will click the raised hand. It puts your name to the top of the participant list. I can see that. And then I can unmute your microphone, if you would like to ask a question verbally. Otherwise, we have a Q&A chat box. There's a chat box and there's a Q&A box. Let's stick to the Q&A box if you can. Type your questions there, and we'll try to keep an eye on that and answer questions as we go. Also, something new is we do have a short, and I mean short, little survey that as soon as you close out of this webinar should get an invite to participate in. If you would, it helps us folks in the academia world to document our impact and success, and was it relevant? Are we wasting our time? If you do not give us any feedback, we can not know how we're doing. So I think I'm great work, but I'm prideful in that manner of what this platform represents. But we need you to tell us. So quick, I think it's 3 to 4 questions. Shouldn't take you any time at all. Please take the time to do that. All right. Without further ado, again, I want to welcome today's topic is utilizing verjus as a wine acidifier. We have 2 folks on our panel today, both from Texas A&M, and we're going to let them introduce themselves. So, Dr. B, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Nathan, for having us on. My name is Andrea Botezato. I am an associate professor and enology extension specialist with Texas A&M University, Texas AgriLife Extension Services. So, and I'm the state enologist for Texas. And Cassie?
I am one of Dr. B's graduate students. I'm in my 4th year of my PhD, and my name's Cassie Marbach, but my Zoom never updated after I got married. But yes, I am working on projects with Dr. B, and I also have a bit of an economics focus with my co-chair, who focuses on horticulture economics. And so I've kind of gotten to blend the two with my research, and it's been very fun and exciting, and I'm grateful to share some of our results with you today.
And I think that's the beautiful thing behind ASEV Eastern Section is we help focus on, assistant professor and professorship work and the research that's going on across the state, but we also give graduate students a platform, especially at our conference once a year, to present the graduate work that's going on, and our specialists in extension and the research world could not do the work that they did without fantastic students such as Cassie. So thank you for that contribution, and we look forward to hearing what you've learned during your studies. There's a couple of things in the chat box I'll just mention. One is I will upload these videos to our ASEV Eastern Section YouTube page, so check out those. Check out the ones from past years. Dr. B, you've uploaded, is that the publication link to some of this information?
Correct, yes. That's one of the articles that came out of our lab. That's the economic analysis for verjus production.
That's it. And Dr. Renee Threadfall from Arkansas has uploaded our our website, ASEV Eastern Section. So if you want to become a member, know anything about it, we have a conference coming up in Ohio this year. One of our sessions at Hangtime, we'll introduce that. So check out being a member. Lots of great information through ASEV Eastern Section. We'd love to have you aboard. So let's get started. Okay, first of all, guys, I'm an extension agent, so I'm a generalist. And while I know a lot about the vineyards, I know little about the enology side. And I understand we have lots of winemakers and people who are way smarter than me. But when I attended ASEV Eastern Section last year in Texas, I sat in on Dr. B's presentation on utilizing verjus as a wine acidifier. And the concept was just totally cool to me, and I'm just a novice. So, and this is being picked up, and there's been a lot, she's doing a lot of research, and it has a lot of applications. So I definitely wanted to have this as a topic to highlight for our discussion. So let's just get started with bare bones. So Dr. B, if you can kind of share with us what is verjus and how's it being utilized around the world?
Yeah, thank you. So verjus is the juice of green grapes. The word verjus itself is coming from French, verjus, which means green juice. So it is a green juice, is a juice obtained from pressing underripe grapes. And usually we make verjus with grapes that have been dropped during crop thinning. So a lot of grape growers practice crop thinning as a form of quality control or quality enhancement for the rest of the grapes that stay on the vines. They drop some proportion of the grapes before they become ripe. And usually, at least in North America, those grapes are considered waste. They're just left on the vineyard floor, and nothing is done with them. Now, my background, I'm Romanian. I was born and raised in Romania. I grew up surrounded by grapes and vines. Romania is a big wine producing country. And I have been exposed to this product for a very long time. So in the Middle East and Romania, Eastern Europe as well, we frequently make juice out of green grapes, and we use that for different purposes. Mostly culinary purposes, so it can be used in cooking as a replacement for vinegar or lemon juice, for example. So in countries where lemons don't grow, where a few, 100 years ago, it was hard to get a hold of a lemon, you would use the juice of green grapes, verjus, as an acidifying agent for cooking. Deglazing, you can use it in salads as a part of the dressing component. You can use it in soups as a souring agent. That's very common in Eastern Europe, actually. You can use it in many, many different ways. And what's even more fun than that is that nowadays it's seeing kind of a resurgence on the cocktail scene. So a lot of bars and mixologists use it in cocktails because on top of the acidity that it adds, it also adds these floral notes and fruity notes that come from the grape. So this isn't a one-note product. It's more complex than, say, just lemon juice or just vinegar. It's really an interesting product to work with on the culinary scene. Now, again, this is the great juice of green grapes. So acidity is high, tartness is high, and me being in Texas and working with high pH juice and wine all the time, I was like, well, wouldn't it make sense to use this, to try to use this as an acidifying agent, to try to drop the pH, raise the TA in a just natural? I'm not a huge fan of the word natural because it's hard to define, but in our case, these are grapes coming from the vineyard. There's nothing unnatural about them. So can we do that? And that was the starting point of our research. Myself, Andrew Lynn, master student, and Cassie have worked together on this project. I also want to point out with a question of what is verjus, that it has been used for medicinal purposes as well. It's being used in the cosmetic industry as well. I have a slide, maybe you can show it at some point, with a bunch of studies that have been performed on medicinal properties of verjus, both on animal models and human models. So it does have, it does appear to have health benefits as well. So that's a plus in my view, if we can use an acidifying agent that has on top of it, health value, then why not? So that's what drove the original research.
Well, my mind's going crazy with ideas of marketing opportunities for vineyards across the country. And I know once we in here in a little while, Cassie's going to kind of talk about what her findings are on these value-added products potentially that vineyards could be putting out there. So that is super cool. So obviously we use tartaric acid and other things. We have why, again, you mentioned natural, so maybe that is a plus that appeals to people as opposed to using the tartaric acid as an acidifier. Again, in the South, same here. Sometimes our pH starts creeping up. We got to have a way to bring that back down, kind of keep things in balance a little bit better. As an enologist and as for the winemakers here, what are the advantages that you're seeing by using verjus as opposed to tartaric acid? I mean, does this method have pros and cons?
Right. Great question. Thank you. So yes, it has pros and cons. I think it has more pros than cons. The cons, I'll start with those, would be the extra labor necessary to produce the juice. So you have to actually, harvest those grapes. You don't just leave them on the floor, the vineyard floor anymore. You have to bring them into the winery, transportation. You have to process them into juice. So you have to use your press or your destemmer if you decide on destemming. So there's some extra steps involved there rather than just getting a bag of tartaric acid and dropping it in. With that being said, I think the pluses kind of clearly overweigh the minuses. Plus, it like I said, it's a natural product. It can be used by wineries that are going the natural way. It is a sustainable product. It's fruit generated during the grape growing process. It doesn't harm the environment in any way. There's not much processing or transportation involved on long distances. This is a local practice that can be applied in your own vineyard winery. And the biggest plus in my view, well, two things. One, by adding verjus, you are adding all these one aroma compounds and aroma precursors to your wine as well. So it's not just one compound. It's not just tartaric acid that you're adding. You're adding tartaric acid, you're adding malic acid, and you're adding aroma components and precursors for those that are going to be fermented by the yeast. That's one big plus, and you can kind of see that on the flavor and aroma profiles of the wines that are produced with verjus. And the second one is that you are increasing the volume of the wine that you're making, and that's big. And this is where the plus on the numbers comes in, and I think Cassie can talk more about that. So depending on the proportion of the verjus that you're adding, how much you want to add, how much you want to drop the pH, you're increasing your volume of wine. So Cassie, do you want to say something about that?
Well, so in the model we made for a Texas winery, when we were looking at all the different inputs and costs associated with making verjus, what happened was, yes, the extra labor, purchasing the grapes if you had to, that is rather expensive compared to tartaric acid. But when you factor in that now you have probably at least 10% more wine to sell, because it does take on average about like 10% by volume to decrease the pH. That's a lot more wine you can sell, especially at the wine prices we have here in Texas. I went on the lower end of what we normally sell a wine for, and it still showed positive net returns for the winery, even on the very, very, very low end. So if a winery is just selling like a normal bottle of wine, with the verjus added, you could significantly increase your net revenue, which was really exciting to see. And that totally outweighed the costs and ended up making it just a more economical choice compared to tartaric acid, honestly.
Well, let's break this down into two components. Dr. B, if you can let's first just walk through a season and the kind of the logistics of what you would do. What are the field target guidelines as far as acidity and berry chemistry that we're saying, hey, now is a great time? And then kind of after we walk through kind of the field methodology side of that, then I think you have a few slides that you may want to share that's kind of just describe some of your findings.
Sure,
So
yes, absolutely. So in terms of the
go ahead.
in terms of the field work, like I said, usually the easiest way to do this is if the grape growers are doing cluster thinning, then whenever they're doing the cluster thinning, you pick up those grapes and you process them. Usually cluster thinning is done somewhere in between 30 days post-bloom and veraison. And it depends, that decision usually depends on the grower when they want to do that. We have looked at both. I mean, we have looked at two different cluster thinning times. On the very first study that we did that 45 days post-bloom, so a little bit closer to veraison. Then on the second year, this past year, we did it at 32 days post-bloom, so a little bit earlier. We wanted to see how it compares. At that point, I have a slide with the chemistry of these verjus that we produced side by side. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah, can I share my screen?
Hopefully.
One second. Oh, I am sorry. I don't know why this is doing this. Try again. Here we are. Okay. So if we look here at this graph here, can you all see this?
Yeah, can you push the start slide presentation so it gets bigger? Just a little
It's
icon.
covered by it's covered.
That's okay.
There.
There you go. That'll work. It's showing you notes too, but it's bigger.
Okay. So if we look here at the bricks, these are the three different types of verjus that we produce. So in 2023, we made Tempranillo verjus and Blanc du Bois verjus. And then in 2022, the original one was Muscat Canelli. So this one, Muscat Canelli, was done at 45 days post-bloom. These two were close to 30 days post-bloom, so a little bit earlier. So if you look at the bricks, Tempranillo has the lowest ones at 3.9 bricks at that point when it was picked, green grapes. And Blanc du Bois has the highest at 9.9 and followed by Muscat Canelli at 9.4 bricks. pH is all pretty low, 2.7, 2.6, 2.6. So that's low, right? We have a good chance of being very effective at adjusting our pH with these levels here, our wine pH. Titratable acidity 24.5 on the Tempranillo, 30 on the Blanc du Bois, and Muscat Canelli 27.3, out of which malic acid was 16.5 in Tempranillo, 20.8 in Blanc du Bois, and 16.7 in Muscat Canelli. And then tartaric acid lower than that, obviously 7.5 in Tempranillo, 8 in Blanc du Bois, and 9.6 in Muscat Canelli. And I want to show here, we're also seeing the polyphenol concentration. So I was talking about that earlier. Quite a healthy amount of polyphenols we find in these juices. So these are milligrams per liter as gallic acid equivalents. So yeah, these are some of the parameters of our verjus that we have seen so far between 30 days post-bloom and 45 days post-bloom. And they vary based on variety as well, but you get an idea, especially with the pH and acidity. Interesting to see that the distribution of acids, again, this isn't surprising. We know that malic acid is high and then it drops quickly as the grapes ripen, but these are the levels that we're seeing in the juice, in the grain juice at that point.
So would it be healthy for a person to kind of pinpoint that time of thinning by doing some berry chemistry sampling throughout the vineyard, or do you feel like a day timetable is adequate?
That's a good question, and
I
I'm not
kind of
I'm
have a
not.
little bit to say.
Yeah,
on
go
that.
ahead, because you're doing the
Yes.
review, right? So talk about
So
that, Cassie.
I'm doing a 3-project dissertation. So my final project is a rather large narrative systematic review of cluster thinning and its effects on wine quality, specifically just wine parameters, not really even the grape parameters I'm focusing on, but in the many studies I've read now, it seems that there is no definitive day that you could ever tell anyone is a great time to cluster thin. I've noticed there's a general stage in growth that people tend to cluster thin. It's like based off of the like stages of growth for a grape. It's like stage 36. But what I've just noticed in all of that is the timing that you do cluster thin does actually have a rather large effect on the final wine quality. So it would just be pertinent for the person to kind of look at their growing conditions, if they're warm or cool climate, and decide whether or not they should cluster thin earlier in the season or later. Because the later you do it in the season, the greater impact it's going to have on, the earlier you do it in the season, the greater impact it's going to have on your final like grape yield. You could significantly reduce your yield if you do it earlier in the season. If you do it a little bit later, you're not going to affect your yield so much. So it's kind of like a pros and cons sort of thing with revenue as well. How much yield do you want to lose? And so sadly, there's just like no definitive answer.
Well, let's talk about quantity. So how many clusters do we need to make a difference in the winery?
That's a great question. Well, I know with our project, did we ever measure the actual amount of clusters that we took
We
off,
do. We
like
have that
percentage?
information somewhere. I don't have it in front of me. I think we dropped like I don't want to say something that's wrong, so I'm
Sure.
not going to say anything. But I have
No,
that.
it's what I've noticed is people typically will cluster thin anywhere between 30% and 60% of their final yield is lost due to cluster thinning is what they estimate. And so, I mean, I don't know the math off the top of my head at all, but you don't need more. What we ended up figuring is about 1 ton of unripe grapes produces 100 gallons of unripe grape juice. Sorry, I'm making sure I kind of kept it simple numbers, like with 1 ton, 100 gallons, and that can acidify your wine with like 10% of your volume, and it'll decrease it a good amount. So you only need about a ton per acre, which seems to be, if you cluster thinned about like 40% of your grapes off the vine, you could maybe get a ton, at least in Texas with our yields. But again, everywhere's yields are different. And so it gets to be quite a on per vineyard basis for determining what the right amount to cluster thin is.
Absolutely. I just know from the viticulture side, obviously, depending on your site and vigor, the variety, a lot of hybrids sometimes can potentially overcrop and may require it. Some people welcome every bit of grapes that they can keep on the vine. They'll turn it into wine. And then I do know some vineyards here in Georgia that definitely do some thinning as well to just kind of open up that zone, make sure that the clusters that are there do ripen and do have that space to grow on out. Is Dr.
But
B, if there's
really,
any,
our research was not focused on cluster thinning, so that wasn't our purpose. We didn't look at necessarily all these parameters in a organized fashion. We were trying just to make verjus and see how it works. But Cassie is doing this review, so that's going to be interesting to centralize all that data and see what's what if we can. We have a question from James Brooks. Colonel Brooks, nice to see you here. What are the storage requirements for the verjus? That's a great question. I just want to say that verjus is very stable on its own due to the very low pH that inhibits most microbiological activity in the juice. We have low sugar levels. Well, there is some sugar, but it's not super high. And also, if we do a basic SO2 addition, so like 50 ppm addition, after we processed it, I can say that we're pretty safe. So we can store it in a tank with some temperature control, or we can put it in bottles and it'll stay stable for a very long time. It doesn't require anything special. It's pretty stable.
So you're putting this through the press as normal. I mean, is
Yep.
there any,
Mhm.
do the presses have issues with pressing that grape since it's that hard?
Yeah, well, we thought we would, and we didn't. So initially, when we started this, we had no idea how it's gonna go, right? We've never done it before. So we were wondering if we'll be able to destem, which we did, and we were able to destem using an absolutely normal destemmer. We used the same equipment that we have in our enology lab for doing all of this. We needed no extra special equipment, nothing. We were wondering if we could press it, if we're gonna have to use enzymes, or if we're gonna have to crush the grapes in some different fashion. We didn't have to. We just used the bladder press, again, the press that we have in our lab. We did go a little bit higher on the pressure than we would go on grapes. So the top pressure was 2 atmospheres that we used. That was the highest level we went to. So no special equipment, no special processing, same process as you would do with any other grapes. And the yield, yes, it is lower than normal grapes because we don't have as much juice in there as we do with normal grapes, but it's not as low as we thought it would be. Like Cassie said, out of about a ton of grapes, green grapes, we get about a little bit more
Little
than
upper.
100 gallons, so probably around 50% yield, somewhere in there, of juice.
Mhm.
Is there any more slides you want to share, Dr. B?
Well, yes, I'm looking at the chat. There's a question from Mike. How does using verjus impact potassium tartrate crystal formation? I've had issues with that using tartaric acid. We didn't look specifically at that. We did see some tartaric salts forming in the wines, but we didn't compare the amount of tartaric salts with a control. So we had the salts regardless whether we added verjus or not. Was there more in the verjus treatment? Maybe we didn't actually quantify that. There probably is some a little bit of salt formation. How does it compare with tartaric acid? Again, I can't answer that question, but maybe that's something that we can look at in the future. So this was the verjus chemistry. These are wines that we made this year. So this is the second batch of verjus wines that we made. And if you look at the chemistry here, this is actually a parallel acidification trial that we ran. We used verjus and 3 other different methods to look at their acidifying power. But if we just focus on verjus here, this is our control with a pH of 4.1, a titratable acidity of 3.8, no malic acid in the control. And this is post-fermentation. I just want to point that out, post adjustment. And the control wasn't adjusted, but no malic acid and 2.6 grams tartaric acid. And then the verjus one, we have a pH of 3.7. So we dropped it from 4.1 to 3.7 using verjus. We increased the titratable acidity to 6.6 by doing that. 4 grams of malic acid, 2.9. So the increase in tartaric is really not that high. The most contribution comes from malic acid. And if you think about that and you think of red wines, I think that's pretty good because one, it drops the pH. We can have a safer malolactic fermentation, and then we have more malic acid to ferment with a malolactic fermentation too. So from my perspective, that can be a positive. And then this is treatment 2, where we drop the pH even more from 4.1 to 3.6, and the results are, on trend, similar stuff that we see happening. And that the rest are different acidification methods. If I'm looking at the original one, the Muscat Canelli in 2022, these were the parameters: Brix 9.4, pH 2.6, titratable 27 grams, malic 16.7, tartaric 9.6. This was our original setup, how we set up the experiment. So we had the control treatment done in duplicate. We added nothing. The starting pH was 3.56, which wasn't terribly high. We we usually have no problem getting high pH grapes in. That year, for some reason, the pH was 3.56, and that we had treatment 1 and treatment 2. With treatment 2, we just try to figure out kind of how much by volume do we need to add to drop the pH by 1 point. So from 3.56 to 3.46, that was our target. And it turned out we needed to add 2% by volume verjus to the ripe juice to achieve that. And then we tried another treatment, and this one was focused on a target pH. Our target pH was 3.3. So we needed 10% verjus addition to drop from 3.6 to 3.3. And that's, we based much of our calculations on this addition over here, 10% by volume. And this was done in triplicate. And these were, again, post-fermentation blending results. So we added the verjus pre-fermentation, and then to the in the proportions that I described, we fermented the wines, and then these are the results. Control 3.54 pH, 5.6 titratable acidity, 1 gram malic acid, 3 tartaric, and then treatment 1, 3.31. Our target was 3.3, so we got very close to that. Happy with that. Titratable acidity 7.2, which for a white wine, in my view, is great. 2 grams of malic acid, 3.6 of tartaric. And then the other one is 3.48, close to our target. 5.9 titratable, 1.2 malic, and 3 tartaric. And that's just the chemistry, but then we did some sensory trials as well. We didn't do descriptive analysis because, first of all, we wanted to figure out if there's a difference in the wines, perceivable difference, and a preference in terms of consumer preference. So these are aggregated results. We did 4 different tastings. These are aggregated results. Total number of people who evaluated these wines is 218. So a good number there. We ran some stats on the results. So we asked 2 questions. Which wine do you prefer? And we presented control treatment 1, treatment 2, and then rank the wines in the order of acidity. The wines were presented blind and in a randomized order. So the evaluators didn't know what they were tasting. In terms of preference, there was no difference in preference between the wines. So that tells us at least that verjus does not have a negative impact on the sensory profile of the wine. So they like them kind of the same. All the wines, in terms of acidity, on the other hand, there was clear differentiation between the 3 wines, with control being the lowest, the middle treatment being rated as mid-acidic, and then the top one being as the most acidic. So significantly different results, yeah, in terms of acidity. And then we're doing the same this year with the wines this year. We haven't aggregated those results yet, but they look pretty similar so far.
That's great information. We have a quick question on the Q&A is, do you know if diseased grape clusters were dropped that thinning? And if so, I mean, well, were they used in these trials? Any kind
we had no issues with disease during any of these experiments. So no, I would know. Had we had issues with disease, we would have separated those bunches.
Okay. Let's see, there's maybe something in the chat. Oh, that was just Renee. Well, so we accomplished the goal, right? So it dropped pH. This is working. I guess if the audience, this is, feel free to continue to ask questions. Let's see here, Dr. B, if you can, let's see. Okay, we got a Stephen Rigby. I'm going to allow you to talk. So you have a question. Let's see if I can get you to unmute your microphone. I just have a raised hand I'm just now seeing. You just have to unmute your microphone.
Yeah.
You there?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you,
Yes.
Stephen. Go ahead.
Yeah, just kind of talking about with the idea of potential disease grapes and all, and it also made me think, with reference to pre-harvest intervals between spray programs and such, and if we were going to, which we do, thin our clusters and such, but I suppose we'd still have to keep in mind pre-harvest intervals
Yes.
for grapes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm just kind of thinking about the logistics of that.
Mhm.
If there were any comments, or maybe we just keep one vineyard block that we're going to particularly do that with, and maybe the spray program is a little different that way. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that could be a solution. Now, I don't know how storing the fruit. So this is just me speculating here. I'm not, don't hold me accountable for this. I'm just wondering if dropping the fruit and storing that dropped fruit for the
Mm-hmm.
full pre-harvest intervals would help. So that would allow you to do the crop thinning at whatever level you need it to do it at, and then by storing the fruit, the pesticides are diffusing, and maybe then it can be processed. I don't know if that's, I don't know. It's just a
That's a
thought.
great question, Stephen. Something definitely considered, because I know, we use Manzate or Mancozeb a lot earlier
Mhm.
season, and those have extremely long harvest intervals. So
Yeah.
very good point.
thank
And then
you.
I saw, we were at the conference, we just came back, Cassie and I, from a conference, 3-day conference in the Hill Country here in Texas. And I saw a presentation, guy in California who was showing how they wash grapes. I haven't seen that before. That was pretty cool. They actually
Mhm.
wash the grapes either with water or citric acid solution. They kind of bathe them. They call it the grape spa. So I don't know, just thinking out loud here. That was neat to see.
Thank you. Any further questions, Stephen? Otherwise, I'm going to mute you.
No, that's good. I appreciate that very much. So
Thank you for your question. Absolutely. Let's see here. Demi says, echoing James' question, have you looked at storing the green grapes versus storing the verjus in terms of which is more stable, how the chemistry changes?
I have not, we have not. Like I said, we just started this project last year. It was just an idea of mine. And as you know, as you do research, more questions pop up as you're getting some answers. So there are so many different ways we could take this. I would love to look at storing green grapes versus storing the juice. I would assume you need more volume, more space to store grapes rather than juice. But I don't know if that would be advantageous or not. We haven't looked at that.
I'll take it a step further, and that's even going from refrigeration or freezing.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
again, so many different things we could look at. And I want to acknowledge TDA. So the Texas Department of Agriculture funded the first part of this project. So very grateful for that. We wish they had continued the funding so that we could look at all these questions. But for now, we are where we are, and hopefully we'll be able in the future. We'll see.
Emma has a question. Did you heat or /cold stabilize the verjus?
No. No,
Or
we
since
did
it's been
nothing. We just basic processing. We did nothing special. We just pressed the grapes as they were. No heating, no enzyme, no cooling, no
Mhm.
cryo, nothing. Just brought them in, processed them right away, made the juice. We settled the juice. We racked the juice. We added some SO2 to it, and that was it.
perfect. All right, so all I hear is cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. So Cassie, let's
Yeah.
talk about some of the economics behind this. You mentioned that, okay, you have your labor costing, cluster thinning. One could argue, look, we're out there cluster thinning already. Throw a bin out there, easy peasy.
Yeah.
Cleans up the mess out in the vineyard. What else are you finding as far as the economics behind this?
Well, what we really discovered here in Texas, sadly, was that not a lot of people were cluster thinning in the first place. So I had to take that into consideration for our Texas model, at least, adding all of the costs associated with cluster thinning. So that did make verjus a little more expensive for a vineyard, but if you don't consider that, then yes, it's very economically feasible to just pick up the grapes and then transport them down to a winery, especially here in Texas. If you're doing that, obviously now in the off season, it's not harvest. It's a little bit more economical even to transport it because it's not as much high demand for trucks and stuff. So that was really positive, actually. Sadly, cluster thinning labor is very expensive, and previous research has kind of established this as unless you're legally obligated to cluster thin, it's kind of hard to justify it with the losses. And so for European countries, especially, different areas that legally require it, it would be highly beneficial, I think, to turn those unripe grapes into something that you could sell.
So as a county agent, I get all sorts of questions about value-added products,
Mhm.
and people want to market things in a certain way. So when we think about this, let's say we cluster thin. Let's say it is a practice in my vineyard. We did it. We've got a cup, 2 to 3 tons of these unripened grapes. We
Mhm.
press them. We make the verjus, but we don't use all of it in the vineyard, in the winery, and in the
Sure.
final step. We're experimenting. All right, so Dr. B's pulled up the presentation here. My
Yes.
goodness, those are some nice numbers. Talk about what we got in front of us here.
Yes, I appreciate that image, Dr. B, because that is a fun topic because it's super profitable to sell verjus according to the model we created, because you don't have to buy any more equipment, because the labor isn't very much in the winery, and you pretty much already have all the bottles there. You're doing it in the off season, so things aren't in as high demand, so it is even a little more affordable. That if you used, I did 2 models, one with a mobile bottling line, one with a manual, because those are the 2 methods typical here in Texas, and both were profitable. The mobile bottling line a little more, but what happens is it's hard to for sure know what consumers are willing to pay for verjus because it hasn't been studied much. I would love to one day study that more, but we can at least look at the market prices of how much verjus is being sold for. And so I, of course, wanted to play it safe, and I went on the lower end of the spectrum. And when you take into account all the costs of pressing, the labor of like just standing there watching the press and talk in the mobile bottling line, it ended up being a very, yes, large profit margin of about $5 a bottle. And I think that was if we sold the bottles for $12 a bottle, because we have one vineyard / winery in Texas that did sell verjus a few years ago to a restaurant and a distributor, and they sold it for $12 a bottle. So that's what I used as my reference. And so, as you can see, others are going for a lot more than that, because it is kind of like an artisanal cultural product. And I could get into way more about how I think verjus is going to be the next big thing. But if you consider a much higher price to sell, I mean, your profits are massive at this point.
Yeah, I noticed looking at these bottles that you can find online. You can buy them online now. What drove the difference in price? The higher priced ones are single varietal verjus. So there's such a thing as verjus single varietals and blends. The
Interesting.
cheaper one are blends. So if you have just verjus from Gewürztraminer, then you're probably going to be able to get a higher price than verjus from different mixed grapes.
Yeah, that kind of makes so much sense to me with the marketing I expect to see with verjus in the future. Just because I do see verjus as kind of like, if most people know what ghee is now, it's a clarified butter. I think verjus is the next product that's kind of going to follow that same marketing path, where we're calling it something really cool, verjus, instead of unripe grape juice. Just like ghee is cooler sounding than clarified butter. I mean, and it's cultural sounding, which is the same with verjus. I think there's massive potential to just continue marketing it as this very unique cultural artisanal product.
All right, so we got Demi asking a question, kind of playing devil's advocate a little bit, and I think it's a great question. I don't quite understand, what is the attraction from a consumer standpoint of overly acidic and tart grape juice? So, Dr. B, you kind of mentioned about like there is a history across the globe. So, again, just
Absolutely.
reemphasize how people are using this, how in the culinary arts, I mean,
Yeah,
how that
so
would be attractive.
absolutely. The attraction, Demi, you might have missed the first part of the of this talk. The attraction is not for the verjus on its own. Nobody buys verjus to drink it as it is. It's used in cooking. It's used as a replacement for lemon juice or vinegar. It's used in creating dressings for salads, for example. It's used in deglazing your steaks or whatever you're cooking, roasts. You can use that in there. It's used in baking as a bit of a tartness enhancing, and it adds this floral and fruity character. And it's used a lot in cocktails as a mixer in cocktails. Again, it replaces lemon juice or other acidifiers that are kind of more one note with this more complex, more interesting acid component.
Yeah.
It's very popular in mixology nowadays.
And on top of that, it is, I think, gonna really strike a chord with the younger millennial consumer who is more obsessed with financial or environmentally like sustainable products. And when you can market that verjus is so sustainable and use that big buzzer word, it does often also attract people to it over lemon juice per se, because that does seem to be its main like competitor in the market is lemon juice. And so if you're like, hey, verjus is actually a sustainable product, super environmentally friendly, and not only that, it's more culturally significant than lemon juice to a point. Verjus has more health benefits. I think it's just going to attract a ton of consumers, especially with like our obsession with being culturally, focused and creating unique culinary flavors.
Demi makes the point, just she thinks it'll be difficult to incorporate into the American market, which isn't aware of the cultural history and uses. And I would say to that, 100%. I mean, we're trying to grow hybrid grapes that are conducive to our areas across the country, and they are names that people have never heard. So marketing, if you don't have a good marketing plan, it is 100% a large part of your efforts. Whether you're selling wholesale to somebody or whether you're a small winery in your local community near a city and are a tourist attraction and sell direct to consumer. From my experience working in extension, people like a story. So if you're doing tours, you tell that story and you tell them that really less than 10% of the vineyards and wineries are doing this and producing this product and the health benefits, people will snatch it up, in my opinion. But that's, again, every market's different and every region is different. So I would say there are always marketing challenges with new products.
You can always have demonstrations. If your winery has a restaurant or you're preparing food, you can incorporate it in some of your recipes. If you're doing mixed drinks, you can incorporate it. We modeled some of our verjus, and I put a QR code on the label that takes the consumer to a site that has mixing, cocktail recipes, including verjus. And people get really excited about that. They want to learn more. They want to experiment. And it's not such a super expensive product anyways. You can just try it, see if you like it, and then keep buying it.
I sometimes think not enough wineries create like partnerships with local restaurants. And so I think even partnering with local chefs and restaurants to feature it at the restaurants can go a super long way, because restaurants constantly have new people coming to them and experimenting and trying new things. And so I think there's also a massive market there to get the word out about verjus.
Well, last year, just to wrap this question, last year we have an event every year called Camp Vino here in Texas that is aimed towards wine lovers, not necessarily the industry. And last year we talked about the verjus and our findings, and this event features local restaurants. So restaurants from Texas, they come in, they cook for the participants. So we asked them, knowing that, we asked them, hey, can you incorporate verjus in some of your recipes that you're going to be featuring at this event? And they did. And it worked out just great. And, again, people were excited. They were excited. The chefs were excited to work with this new fun thing. So it was a win all around.
Well, again, what I was going to say was, if you're cluster thinning already, it's, in my opinion, you're not having to age this, to my understanding. Is that correct? I mean, you can press this,
Yeah.
bottle it,
Yep.
straight to market. So yes, there's always the labor in putting it into the winery, running it through the press and destemmer, but it's maybe an opportunity to recover some of those labor costs and offset that. Everybody's going to be different. Everybody's economies of scale are different, so you'll have to crunch those numbers. But the purpose of today was to introduce this product and this practice, and then its benefits in the winery as well as a value-added product. And you have a name, Dr. B, here with us today that you can reach out to and get more information if this is something that interests you. Again, it was just, to me, very, very new and different when I heard them present at our last conference. So
just want to say that, so the link that I posted in the chat will take you to the economic analysis study that we published. All the numbers are in there. So all the numbers that Cassie used and how she came up with the numbers is explained in there. It's very detailed, step by step, everything that we took into account, or she took into account when doing her calculation. So you can take a look at that if you're curious. And I had another thing, but I forgot. Sorry.
Well, we'll let you pause and think about it. Dominique says, excited to provide this ingredient to our chef at our on-site restaurant and providing a packaged version for guest and cooking. Thank you for that comment.
Yes, yay.
Again, still, we got a couple minutes. We're welcome to open the floor with.
I remember, I don't want to forget. The question, I think one of the question was whether we cold stabilized or heat stabilized the verjus before. So I misunderstood that question, sorry. The answer is no, we did not do that. We cold stabilized, so we chilled our wines after production. Like I said, we saw some salts drop, but we saw them both in the control and the verjus treated wines. In terms of protein stability, there was no difference between the control and treated wines in terms of that. So didn't have a big influence on the protein stability of the wines. I hope that helps.
Perfect. Howard says, food and wine has an article printed in 2023. Verjus is so much more than grape juice.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Perfect. Any further questions? This has been a great topic. I was actually worried we weren't going to be able to get through it all, but I think that flowed very nicely. Again, everybody's different. We've got participants from across the country today. I know y'all don't get to see that, but we already uploaded the participant list. And so everybody's climate's going to be different. It's just an opportunity to expose, let y'all know that land-grant universities are working on this. This is what we do. And we are excited to share these opportunities with y'all.
We're also open to suggestions. If you have thoughts, like what else could we do? What else should we look at? Let us know. I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, and I always welcome feedback from the industry and ideas. So,
and I would say, if you want to do that feedback, if you're willing to do that for us, again, there will be a survey. I believe once you clicked end or leave the meeting, a link is supposed to pop up. We'll see if it does. It's our first time, but leave those messages for Dr. B in that comment section, and anything else that you found value, if you wouldn't mind. That's super fantastic. I just want to thank Dr. B and Cassie for joining us today and presenting. Thank you for all the engaging conversation. That was fantastic. I want to let you know that in March 14th, we're going to be talking about managing rot towards the end of the season. Reviewing products, spray guide resources. Dr. Nita Mizahu from Virginia Tech and Phil Brannon from the University of Georgia, and possibly some other panelists will be looking at pathology issues, again, related to rot in late season. So we hope that you can join us there. round of applause for our speakers again and our participants. Thank y'all so much. And this, again, I provided the YouTube link that this will be uploaded. ASEV Eastern Section videos. Give me a couple of days, and that ought to be there if you want to share this with all of your industry friends.
Well, it was a pleasure being here, and it was so much fun. It's such a fun topic and such a promising topic, I think, too.
Sounds good. I'm going to thank you, Cassie. I'm going to stop recording.
Thank y'all.